I mean, I thought about it. I actually had not thought that Senator Mikulski was going to retire. It was a total and complete surprise. In fact, I think the last conversation that I had had with her was about getting ready for the election and what we were going to do together, you know, in support of her reelection and my reelection. And so then when she announced it, I, you know, stepped back a little bit and just said, okay, let's think about this. And I made, you know, a number of phone calls. A number of people were calling me to just touch base about it. And then after that, I decided that I would have something to contribute to Maryland in the Senate, and that I should go out and make my case to the voters. It's a very gut check kind of decision.
Yeah.
So I mean, and so it really, I mean, for me, it's also an opportunity to get around the state and to hear concerns that, as you described, are different in the different regions. And although, you know, the basic things, you know, people wanting to work a decent job and, you know, make enough to take care of themselves and their families and for their children to do better than they did and have good schools and no crime, those are uniting things, but then there are differences in the region, and it's important to hear them.
Yeah.
Well, I'm an old school progressive. I really am. I mean, because I think that, you know, I raised my son, you know, mostly on my own, and I think I share the values of so many working families who just really struggle to make ends meet on a day-to-day basis and really just want a better life for their children. It's what my parents wanted for us. My parents were not formally college educated, but they wanted their children to go to college. We didn't know that we were going to have to take out thousands and thousands of dollars in student loans in order to do that, sort of piece together an education. But these are things that all of our families want. And I think that I have the ability to communicate that and to work on those things that are really important to everyday people. And frankly, my mom and my sisters and my son, the people around me, keep me grounded so that I really do know what's important to working people. I think it's important for us to focus on education that is about a lifetime of education that really connects us to what we need to do in the K-12 and then after high school graduation so that people can get jobs. And right now we have kind of a mismatch between the workforce needs and the skill set that's coming out of high school and out of college. And we have to close that gap so that our children can succeed in the 21st century with the kind of technical and other skills that they need. And I think that when we do that, then it's an easy transition to figure out how we're going to focus on building an economy that works for all of our families. And it has to begin with education that really matches up with the skill set that we need for the work. I think Marylanders want us to stop dividing and conquering. And so I look at, I'm not from Baltimore City, for example, but I look at some of the needs in Baltimore City, and they're very similar to some of the needs in Prince George's County, where I live, but they are also very similar to some of the needs on the Eastern Shore and the Lower Shore. And I think that the best United States Senator is going to pull those needs together. And as I said, I believe they focus on education, on workforce training and development, and on investing in research and technology. And I think if Maryland can focus on investing in our research and technology capacity, we're going to be able to produce the kind of workforce that's going to take those jobs. And those are going to be jobs that aren't going to go someplace because of a trade deal. They're not going to go someplace because they move to another state, because Maryland is going to be the place where we're about creating 21st century jobs. We are, but there are differences. You know, so for example, when there were proposals that threaten Social Security and Medicare to lower the benefits for our seniors, I actually stood up front and led numbers of Democrats in the House of Representatives to oppose those kind of changes. And Mr. Van Hollen said that those were things that he was willing to consider. I just think that we have kind of a bedrock principle in the Democratic Party and a contract in some ways from one generation to the next generation that's about, you know, having a floor for our retirement security, finding ways to strengthen it, and then growing jobs and opportunities so that we contribute more to it. And so that is a distinction between Mr. Van Hollen and myself. I'll give you another one. So, for example, when the budget sequester was put into place, I actually was one of only a handful of Democrats who voted against that sequester, because I was looking ahead to the point at which we would be using a sledgehammer on our budget instead of a scalpel to make the kind of cuts that we need to meet our responsibilities. And Mr. Van Hollen, not only did he vote for the sequester, he negotiated the sequester, and now everybody wants to get rid of it because it is operated exactly as I would have predicted. And so I lead on on things, and I'm not willing, if the opportunity calls for me to stand alone for a moment, recognizing that at some point what I believe and what I've fought for is going to be part of the mainstream. And indeed, that's what's happened on a number of these issues. I mean, today, for example, Mr. Van Hollen really strongly supports expanding and strengthening Social Security, which is a change for him. He now opposes the trade agreements that are coming forward. That's kind of new for him. And now he wants to get rid of the sequester that he negotiated and voted for. And so I'm a leader, and it's kind of what I learned from my dad and my mom too, and I'm not afraid to lead. It's the nature of our history that we have these ups and downs and waves in our politics, and so I'm not afraid of that, because the alternative is living someplace where we don't have those kind of choices. But the reality is that it's up to me as a Democrat, an aspirant to the United States Senate, somebody who wants to step into Barbara Mikulski's shoes, to make the case to the voters of Maryland that it's better to have me as a strong progressive Democrat in the United States Senate, fighting for Maryland's working families, and most especially that is true in an environment in which we could see control by one party of all three bodies of our government. I think it is even more important than to have a strong leader like myself in the United States Senate. Well, I want people to know that in a very short time since I've come into the House of Representatives, that I really have become a leader. I serve on our leadership team now, leading our steering and policy committee. I've done that on our science and technology committee. I've led the Democratic women in the House of Representatives on issues like equal pay and access to child care. And so I've been a leader in a very, very short time in the House of Representatives, and I know that I'll be that kind of leader in the United States Senate. And I think, perhaps the greatest misperception, frankly, is that, I'm the sort of left-winger progressive who, doesn't want to compromise or negotiate. And I think that what is true is that I'm never going to compromise away our principles and our values, but always willing to work with people who want to fight for working. Well, I think particularly with respect to Iran, which I think is a threat, a national security threat, not just for the United States, but really for the region. And this is why I've been strongly supportive of the President's negotiating posture on an Iran nuclear deal. I think that anything that we can do to lessen the possibility that Iran will have more immediate capability to launch, to have a nuclear capacity, then the better. I believe that we're on that path now with the framework that's in place, and I hope that in very short order that framework is going to be filled with the details that are going to allow us the kind of inspection that we need, with or without trust, that we have the ability to verify what it is that Iran is doing and that it is lowering its nuclear arsenal, and that we will have access to all of the facilities and all of the processes by which Iran has developed its capacity thus far. I think that that will be in the strongest national security interest of the United States and of the region, including the protection of Israel, which is one of our strongest allies in that region. And with respect to Iraq, I don't believe that putting more quote-unquote boots on the ground in Iraq is going to inure to our benefit and our national security interest. At the same time, figuring out ways that we can enable and empower the Iraqi government and Iraqi army to meet its own national security interests and needs is really important. And so I've supported those efforts, but we can't go for another decade risking American lives and treasure in Iraq. And the reality is that with the Islamic State, I mean, the Islamic State is actually morphed from a number of different threats in that region. And so I think the stronger the Iraq army can be in fighting the Islamic State there, but we have to recognize that these interests that may call themselves the Islamic State can materialize, especially through social media, in a lot of different kinds of ways. And so the challenge for the United States is trying to meet those threats, make sure that we have the security apparatus in place here in the United States so that those don't become homeland threats. And I think that that is a challenge enough in this social media environment. But continuing to train and strengthen the Iraqi army so that it can meet its own capacity, and figuring out, although I think it is complicated, the good guys versus the bad guys in Syria, so that there can be a defense there. And I think that we have to prevail upon others of our partners, like Turkey, for example, to meet its own responsibility along that border. Just one of the real strengths and alliances that I have with the Eastern Shore is trying to make sure that we continue to protect the Chesapeake Bay, both for the economic health of the region, but really for the economic health of the state of Maryland, because it's such an economic contributor. And it is an important resource for us. On the Science Committee, I have been the strongest defender of the largest estuary in the nation, in the Chesapeake Bay, because it's such a value to us and really such a precious value to the people of the Eastern Shore, but it's an economic big value for the state of Maryland.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much.
Thank you.